Okay, I'm Teresa Cohn, and I have to think, yeah, the first time I was at Taylor was through the McCall Outdoor Science School. And so I was first there with a group of students. Do you want a year? Probably doesn't matter. Huh? Let's see. It would have been 2011, maybe? No, that's not right at all. Sorry, that's totally not right. 2015. 2015, yeah. And so I traveled in with a group of graduate students for the McCall Outdoor Science School. Want me to talk about it?
Well,
Or what do you want to know about it?
how that was the first time you visited Taylor?
Yeah. I'm trying to think here. I think that's right. I think I flew in charge of a group of students straight off the bat. I'm pretty sure. Yeah,
For Moss?
for Moss. Yeah.
And then later on you were more involved, right?
That's right. Yeah. So and that became kind of instantly. I mean, I would say the first time I was at Taylor, I came from Montana, and even within a few minutes of landing at Taylor, I just had the sense. To me, it felt a lot like Yellowstone in terms of just the level, how it felt. The wildness felt very similar to me to being in Yellowstone, and from the get-go, it was a amazing place to teach. And it was a place where, you sort of have to, I think, you just, for me to teach well there, you really do monitor how much of yourself to put in and how much of yourself to remove. Because I think if you're doing your job, the place is teaching, And so you're just sort of facilitating this process of students really being able to deeply engage with a place that can be certainly awe-inspiring, but also incredibly agitating, right? And so you're managing that for students in the sort of profound learning experiences that can happen there when things are going well.
What is the place teaching then?
I mean, this is to me really a question of what's the worth of this and as an educational experience. And I think there are many things that you can learn at Taylor. But the rarity of it is that I think it's a place that's so different than a college campus in that it's integrated learning whether you like it or not, right? And so you're learning all kinds of things. You're certainly learning about, the science that we would intend to happen there. It would just happen at Taylor for years and years and years. But I'm also interested in all the other things you're getting learned in the process, which is how to function in the community. What is designated wilderness? How do we inhabit this place? What is it like to inhabit a landscape with predators? How is it to move through a landscape differently? And I think all of these, we might say in academic language that this is interdisciplinary, but I think it's more profound than that. It's sort of ask students to be different in the world. Because that's what the place asks of them.
That makes me think of wilderness doctrine, and with the exception of the station manager, Taylor is a place where man is but a visitor, in the sense that Taylor is a place of comings and goings, students arriving, students leaving, researchers arriving and leaving. And so I wonder what people take back from Taylor. Like what sticks with you when you leave Taylor, when you're far from Taylor? Like how does Taylor stay with you, do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I might backtrack a little bit and say one of the things that Taylor does well is help us have personal experiences of time beyond our own geological landscape, hydrological landscape, cultural landscape, right? And so I think too, when I'm at Taylor, there's so much Dukadika present still in that landscape that it reminds us that actually this time of comings and goings is brief.
What do you see when you step out the front door?
Dave Lewis. Is that where we are? Yeah, the hay meadow, obviously in front. And you just sort of feel everything to your back, which would be Pioneer Creek going up to Dave Lewis, that whole basin. I mean, I sort of, in my mind, would see snow on Dave Lewis. And then the ridge limes wrapping around down to the hay meadow. Out front, beyond the hay meadow, Big Creek, the bridge, certainly the vegetation along Big Creek, the solar panels and the energy for the whole place. You know, I guess when you're out at Taylor and you're sort of like monitoring the place, that's a bit really important. Keeping the energy up, you know, the internet, where all that happens. And then across the bridge and out to the benches, you know, that kind of like stack up. And then beyond that, you know, we, like 2 summers ago, I guess, flew in to Cold Meadows and hiked, I guess, maybe 25 miles down. And so now, like, this vastness, and Jim and Holly would have this, Morris, all those people who have on their feet gone back ways. So you have this then sort of like layered, beyond that, I have this like layered memory of everything that we'd seen, you know, back in there. Some really amazing country once you get up high and can look around. And then, you know, once you're up that high, there's sort of a geography of the Middle Fork and the way that it curves around the Salmon, and sort of how that then expands into this great wilderness, you know, the Frank Church River of No Return.
Have you, I guess, can you, so were you always leading students into Taylor? Or
Not always, but most of the time. I'm trying to think if I was ever back there and not once I was probably back there and not responsible for a group of students. No, that's not true. That's not true at all. No, we went back when Meg and Pete left, the caretakers. There was a gap where we were filling in caretaking, so I was there probably for a month, on and off. One break in there. I was back during COVID for a month cleaning out the lab, all the stuff that had piled up over years and years and years, which was amazing and disgusting, and all kinds of stories, you know, in all of the things that people left behind. And I went back. I've been back on research trips too. Yeah, so with just researchers and not students. So actually, it's interesting, but probably I've spent more time back there without students than with, now that I think about it.
what was that like, managing Taylor day to day as a caretaker?
I mean, a short stint for me, right? We're saying, how long was I doing that for? I mean, like 3 weeks a month, you know, so relative to John Patton and, you know, Meg and Pete and all the folks that have spent time back there, mine was a very different experience. As an academic, though, right, as a professor, it was really refreshing to tend to the basics, right? To really have to learn how to keep solar going. You know, and actually, now that I am reflecting on this, probably one of my most profound experiences at Taylor was when Pete got hurt and had to be airlifted, life flighted to Boise, and we flew in, Mark and I, and our daughter, young, she was little, she was like 3, flew in the middle of winter. And, you know, you have to really think about water and you have to really think about energy in the middle of winter. So that was, in a way, enlightening and refreshing, because I think a lot of times, especially when you're like a professor and not, director or anything like that, you're kind of protected, you're buffered from all of that. But it was great. I loved learning. I mean, learning how to mow the airstrip. I loved that. And you have to look at the airstrip. I will never look at the airstrip the same way again. Like where the dents are, where the rocks are that you can't hit. All the ways that you have to maneuver the mower when you're moving through that place. I really like that. You think about pack rats. You think about it's a different relationship to that place that I found expansive. Yeah, and again refreshing. Yeah.
Did you ever have to knock ice off the water box?
Yes. Yeah, the slush ice. Yeah. That would get caught in there. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was one of Jim's favorite pastimes.
Oh, did he like to do that?
I don't think so. I think he hated it.
Yeah. 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 It's a different place, and we were not there in the deep darks. I can't remember when we flew in, but it was not. It was nothing compared to what the winter caretakers do. I have a healthy respect for people who spend the whole year there.
Yeah, I mean, it would be like The Shining for me, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of the folks, when you hear them back there too, it's just like the wildlife interactions. Amazing, We were there in October. This is what'll happen when you talk to like Morris and Gary. If you let them start going, like the stories, people just tell long stories about this place. There's a kill on the airstrip when we were there. It was pretty amazing. Yeah. And wintertime, it all comes closer in. There are fewer people there. So.
Can you talk about it?
The kill?
Winter kill? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah. It was deer. It was a doe. Let me think about it. Yeah. Yeah. So. One second. Mike Doris. Like, probably not supposed to say this. He's my favorite pilot out there. He'd flown in. We were there. I don't know if he was bringing in. No, he must have been bringing. I can't remember who was coming and going at that time. But we got out of the plane. He kind of scratches his head like he does, like messes with his hat, and he's like, "Yeah, I think I hit something down there on the airstrip. You might want to check it out, And so he flew off, and we walked down, and it was the gut pile of this deer that had been like disemboweled, and the intestines were like strung across the airstrip, And then it's like the Taylor thing. You're just like, what happened? And it's like this mystery that then you're trying to untangle, and you're looking for, is it a cat? Is it a wolf? Is it And so then, it took us a while to put the pieces together, and we're writing emails to Jim and Holly and reporting in and sending pictures, and wrote to Sophie Gilbert, who had her theory, which was some sort of combination of bear and cougar because of the way that things were strewn around. Jim and Holly really went for wolf, and then you're watching, and everything changed. Everything changed overnight. The deer, the like Taylor deer that would hang around and eat apples and all that, like the Taylor pack. They were gone, just gone. There was one little fawn that was running around. Probably it's the fawn, the mother that died. Just sort of calling and calling and calling. But it was quieter. It was just changed. And then probably 2 days later, one of our students went up towards the fire lookout, actually, by Rush Creek, and came around the corner by the sage flats, and face to face with a wolf, that then both of them, I think, had like this sort of eye lock, and then they scattered. The wolf ran, and then we saw more wolf sign, so I think sort of the theory settled in on wolf and wolf kill on the airstrip. And Colton has stories about being down at the beach. I mean, you'll see all these places in winter where he saw deer-wolf interaction right there on the ice. But yeah, a lot of that big world comes in the winter, and things shift, and you get to watch the dynamics of the whole place change.
Are there any other memorable wildlife encounters?
Oh yeah. every time you go back there, there's something. Yeah. I think, especially, I think, like the ones that instantly jump into my mind, I don't know, I'm just thinking about like otters and minks but twice down at the home site, Jim Kingery would call it, like downstream a little bit, around the corner. First time, I would say animals came straight into class, so you'd be like teaching. And then the first time, bighorn sheep came down right off the ridge, right down towards us. So, you sort of like sit and watch this happen. And I remember sort of saying quietly, "Is this the first time any of you've seen bighorn sheep?" And there was a young woman who was like, "Yeah, and I've never seen an eagle either." And there was like an eagle circling overhead, So really profound experiences for students who haven't ever interacted with these kinds of beings before. And a bear, another time, this is a different year, a bear came down across the river, and we just kind of held class with this bear, like rooting around and flipping rocks and things like that. So it's, yeah, and again, like that, it sort of shifts everything about the way that you're interacting to have that happening around you as part of your experience, your learning experience. And then wolf, bighorn, eagles, also, yeah, lots and lots of wildlife interactions with students. And I am no, again, this is not, Jim and Holly would have so many, And I'm trying to think, mine are like 7 years of working with students back there. That's relative to the amount of time that Jim and Holly have spent back there. It's nothing, it's nothing. But every single time that you're there, it's not like you count on it, but something happens. Yeah.
It's interesting hearing you talk about Taylor. I don't know how to say this. You talk about Taylor as though the people associated with Taylor are part of its physical environment. Like it feels like in your head, Jim, Holly,
Yeah.
Colden, Jim Peak are
Yeah.
part of its physical geography.
It's a community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think the people that stick around at Taylor are pretty committed to that place. And even if you don't overlap with them, you sense that community. It's like wandering into the orchard when you're back there. And there are these trees, and somebody planted them. You're grateful that somebody planted them. But you don't know who it is. I can make some guesses. In this case, like there are a handful of people that could have done that or added to them or whatever. But you know that it's a community that's larger than you're now. And yeah, to me it seems very part of the landscape. Janet Pope, she spent a ton of time back there, and then all the people that I can't name that I know have come and gone, Yeah, no, I think it's very much a community. And, more than that too, I mean, I probably have a different take on this than somebody like, than Jim and Holly and Colden and, coming from a different background. I'm not like a bighorn sheep scientist or anything like that. But they're communal research projects that I would say, whether they're named and recognized or not. I love some of Colden's work on thinking about how dynamic that place is and how its dynamism is linked to its biodiversity, especially in the stream ecology world of things. In the repeat photo work, we are thinking about change in a different way. But I think there's a common conversation in the Taylor community that's about change. And whether you're coming from humanist perspectives, you're a social scientist, or whether you're a stream ecologist, that's a great place to really engage with changing landscape. Whether it's the change that's necessary to maintain that kind of ecosystem, whether it's climate change on top of that Sarah Godsey's working with, or Mary Ingalls, or whether it's the change, in the last 100 years it's a place in which we as a common community can think about that as a body of questioning, that I think is robust in really what we would call in, interdisciplinary or integrated ways, across the landscape. And I think Taylor has huge potential for that kind of work in a creative research community. Water, I talked to Morris a little bit about this too. Your passion, salmon. There are incredible stories about connectivity from Taylor to the Atlantic, and the ways in which these fluid ecosystems kind of connect communities across it. I just think there's a lot of potential to keep building around some of these research themes, and go back and mine some of the research that's been done too, to see what part of the common conversation has dropped off for 10 years and we need to pick up again, no matter what the discipline is.
Yeah. Taylor as a site of change is a common theme that comes up in these interviews, and it's so interesting because it does kind of go against this idea of wilderness that you get from reading the doctrine, I guess. As this place that is untrammeled by man, that's kind of eternal and wild.
Yeah, it's so dynamic. Yeah. Anybody who's spent time there, it's such a dynamic, kind of agitating environment in big ways. It's like, and right, that memory of mine was not even then about landslides, which you always hear when you're back there after a rain event, or the whole river changing colors overnight because of a rain event upstream, or there's things that are constantly changing. The one that I was thinking about is Holly's story about the fire ripping through there. It's a very dynamic place. You don't have to spend that much time there to really feel the intensity of that kind of change. And I think again, I don't know, around here in the West, when we're talking about change, it's who's moving in, what houses are getting built. It's a different scale and pace of change. It's a different kind of change. And Taylor allows a unique kind of lens into that dynamism and what kind of, almost scales of change. What's the continuum of change? What kinds of change are we talking about? It's an incredible place to engage with those questions.
What do you think we can learn from that experience and those questions? As students.
Yeah, I'm a geographer, and so people have all kinds of questions about the what's and how's, and for me it's a where. The fundamental question is, where are we? Where are we? What is this place? Where are we? And really, I think it helps us know where we are and who we are in the where we are.
That's a question that has long obsessed me. Also, when are we?
Yeah, this is also a good question. This is a good question. And here's another thing about Taylor. Let's go back to the time conversation, which is one of my favorite things to think about right now. Just spatiotemporalities and sort of sense of this thing. Well, maybe I've already said this. Taylor really, because we're stepping, and this is very wildernessy, we're stepping out of our sort of day-to-day containers. We have the capacity to imagine other kinds of times and experience other kinds of times and other kinds of spaces, The way that the sheep eater Dukadika time speaks to your time isn't that distant. Oh my gosh, it's a blink compared to geologic time, right? The kind of work Sarah Godsey's doing, I don't know if you've talked to her. I think her groundwater work is amazing. So trying to understand how long the groundwater is sitting in these underground reservoirs. So the time in which it goes into the ground and comes up in springs. that's a totally different kind of time, right? And the time with like the clock is water as it moves underground. I think that's an incredible way of experiencing time in a place like that. And again, you can access these, like you are expanded in your thinking by the community of research, right? So another thing we should be doing at Taylor, supporting a robust community of research, right? And this means, and Colden would say this too, and I would say, those dinner time conversations, critical. That campfire that's sitting there, critical, right? That's where this information gets changed. That's why I can say, you know what Sarah Godsey's doing, you know what Colden's doing, right? And then we have this common conversation. And the more diverse the people are around that campfire, I think the more interesting it gets. You know, even with outfitters back there, they know a ton, right? The people that walk along that trail, that's a part of the community of not necessarily Taylor, but Big Creek. That's its own community too, right? And Taylor interacts with that community, but it also is its own community.
Yeah. In a way, Taylor has long been a kind of campfire. Like,
Yeah,
it's always been of interest to human beings.
yeah,
I mean, for as long as humans were in that region, for thousands of years, humans have been drawn to that specific
yeah,
location of Taylor's,
yeah,
um, and have been having conversations like that
right.
in the same space. I wonder what it is about Taylor's physical, but also its immaterial geography that tends to hold people there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, I bet, you know, if you, it'd be interesting, so it sounds like you're asking this geography question too, of like, what do you see when you walk out Dave Lewis, or wherever people orient themselves. I don't know if everybody orients themselves from Dave Lewis. I bet most people would talk about water, you know, and the streams and what's happening. But, you know, Cliff Creek coming down, Pioneer Creek, Big Creek, it's like, it's a place where water comes together. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a confluence.
It's confluence. It's confluence, that's right. That's a great metaphor for it, yeah. Yeah.
So we can wrap up soon. But
Yeah, I'm good.
What kind of future do you want to see for Taylor?
Yeah, it's just a great question. Yeah. I'll give you the easy version first. That I think the best stewardship of that place is really supporting that creative community, and in a very sort of like nuts and bolts financial way, making sure Taylor has enough money to operate year round and support bare bones people to maintain it, you know, because that's what the creative community will rely on. And then a step up from that, for a lot of us to be thinking like, I think, what are the themes that we ought to be working on, or what are the common conversations, and what are the critical issues of our time that can only be answered and engaged in at Taylor, and kind of building that conversation. Those conversations are happening, but I think we could structure those in more productive ways. Part of the process that you're involved in, I think, is great for this. It's bringing up conversations, you know, and making people sort of think about it more deliberately. So I think all of that's good. It's a fantastic educational facility. So it's expensive. You know, again, it's just nuts and bolts finances of like it needs finances to be able to make that work. It's a really important place for students, and not just in the sciences. And I think I'm going to like throw in a little gendered piece of this too. The vast majority of the students who have landed there in the past few years, through my experiences at Moss, that other field campus, and Taylor's, they're women, you know, who are signing up for Semester in the Wild, who are there with Moss programming too. So I think, you know, really thinking about, really looking at the dynamics of Taylor, how it's being used, who's interested in it, making sure that we're creating these interdisciplinary, holistic conversations on the instructor level and on the student level, really looking at those dynamics and making sure they're equitable and honoring who's in the room. I think that's really important and has to be part of the next step of Taylor for it to function in its best way. And then I think Taylor ought to be thinking about, I mean, I've kind of already said this, climate change. If I were to name themes, right? Change in general, but really climate change. I think that's an important conversation. Water, connectivity, those themes, building them out. I think that it could be a very rich conversation. And what else do I want to say about what I think Taylor should be? Having said all of that, Taylor always has and needs to continue to be careful about expansion, right? There's a carrying capacity for that place. And there's real impact with airplanes flying in and out. So I know, Jim and Holly and mules, and thinking about what our footprint is there and what it ought to be there is also a critical part of the conversation. And I know it's a part of the financial conversation too, but we can't lose track of our impact on that place because we need the finances to be able to support the creative community, right? I think there's a real delicate balance in all of that. And then the other thing is what you're doing, right? We need to make sure we're telling the stories that exist there. I mean, Morris, Gary, Jim, Holly, there are so many stories that need to be part of that community conversation. So I think building connectivity between the community that's there over time would be invaluable to the future of Taylor too. And that's part of the work that you're doing, which I think is really important.
Yeah, and I think it would be important to bring in outsiders.
Yes. Yeah. No, this is exactly right. It shouldn't be that insular. And, I think there's a lot of push at U of I to build scholars and get scholars in there too. I can see a million reasons that Taylor would be a site for scholars from all over the place, students from all over the place too. I think you're exactly right. There's no need to be insular, and growing that creative community is really important as well. Yeah, exactly.
Jim really likes the idea of an artist in residence.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of that?
Love it. I love it. Yeah, artists in residence, writers in residence, cartographers in residence, Jack. Let's be creative about, and in some ways too, the way that I think we might go about a conversation like that is to say, okay, what's the theme? Do we want to talk about connectivity? Okay. Then let's bring someone in who can inform us in a new way about how to think about this. Architects, I don't know, I mean, even putting people there who might not imagine would be there. I think that's the kind of thing that generates dynamism, to match the place.
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I think we got some good stuff. Unless there's anything else that you want to say that I'm probably unable to prompt. Beef?
What's that?
Any beefs?
Beefs about Taylor?
No, I mean, if there's something you want to, get off your chest about Taylor.
Oh, no. Everybody does. I mean, it's part of that place, too. It's you care about it. You care about it deeply.
Care about it too much.
Care about it too much. Maybe too much. But it's just everybody who's attached to Taylor, there's heartbreak involved, and there's always this sort of probably everybody you talk to is clash between a cumbersome institution and wilderness. How the hell do those things come together? There's always going to be problems with how that works, So I think there's inevitable, beefs, experiences with that.
Those two things are actually very tightly woven together: wilderness and large institutions.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's very true. That's very true. Yeah, and there's sort of the big wilderness, capital W wilderness and little w wilderness too. And maybe it's the little w wilderness that's different. That's sort of on its own terms a little bit more, and that it's on its own time frame. It's on sort of doing its own thing. internet, you know, internet back there is like, I'm sure everybody, you talk to would have a strong opinion about how that should be done better, where the TV should live, all of that kind of stuff. But you're always going to have this sort of like clash between those worlds. What was I going to say? Anything else about Taylor? No. Just like, not relevant, but I dream about it at least 3 times a week. Yeah, This is, again, it's like it's just there in all of its iterations, It's kind of a place that, I wonder about Jim and Holly and sort of having spent the amount of time they did back there, just like where it lives in them and how it manifests. Yeah.
In your dreams, are you just there at Taylor?
Yeah, all sorts of things happening, airplanes and just like, all sorts of iterations, yeah.
Do you remember any specific dreams?
I mean, I can remember a million scenes from them, like, or like the airstrip's not quite the same, but it's still an airstrip, or, and I wouldn't say like, there's like all kinds of iterations. None of them like the real actuality, but yeah, and so there's something that sort of like, permanently stays with you, at least for now. Maybe not permanently, but for now, for sure. Yeah.
Or you're just remote viewing.
Maybe, I'll let you know what I see. Yeah, I'll have to go back through to see. Anyway, yeah, Taylor, it sticks with you. I was going to say something else too about Taylor. You're going to talk to the pilots?
I'd like to.
Talk to Mike Doris.
Doris? Let me write that name down. I've written it
I mean,
down.
Walt too, but they've seen so much, from the air.
Gosh, I'm sure.
Yeah. Have a great deal of respect for those pilots.
It's Mike Doris?
Mike Doris, yeah.
And who was the hydrologist you mentioned?
Sarah Godsey.
Sarah Godsey?
Yeah, she's at ISU. Colden can link you to her.
Because I'm friends with a hydrologist getting her PhD right now here named Grace Pevin.
Oh, she's with Mary.
Yeah.
Parallel research, parallel work. They and Mary and Sarah have linked, but it's not like they have joint projects. It'd be great if they did at some point.
Uh-huh.
There's huge potential for really interesting water work. I mean, there's already a ton of really interesting water work out there, but like large scale, sort of, yeah.
Cool, yeah.
Fire too,
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It could be really interesting firework out there too.
Yeah, I don't know of any fire ecologists.
No, we're trying to, who, hold on. The person who we were trying to, who's interested in working there and has worked in the Frank before is at BSU. I can come up with a name, but maybe later.